widely used mutation rate. We have mutation rates. For non-coding human mitochondrial DNA relies on estimates of the date when humans and chimpanzees shared a common ancestor, taken to be 5 billion years ago. But a few studies have begun to suggest that the actual rates are much faster. Regardless of the cause, evolutionists are most concerned about the effect of a faster mutation rate. Researchers have calculated that mitochondrial Eve, the woman whose mitochondrial DNA was ancestral to all that in living people, lived 100 to 200,000 years ago in Africa. Using the new clock, she would be a mere 6,000 years old. No one thinks that's the case. So please notice that sometimes when they do things without any bias and they're actually just doing good science, sometimes they come up with the right answer. And that is that Eve was about 6,000 years ago, according to studies in DNA research. Anyway, it's kind of fun. All right, let's get into how long things have been around, okay? And it has a lot to do with the glasses you look through. So, two big problems for creationists, two things. Number one is fossil order, radiometric dating, and fossil order. Fossil order we've already talked about. Why are dinosaurs always in the same areas, and why are certain animals always in the same fossil record? Remember we talked about the slow waters rising and animals getting caught in certain regions only. And it wasn't a big washing machine that threw everything together and made homogeneous deposits. It was that way. But the other thing is radiometric dating, or in other words, how old the rocks are. This is a challenge for us, and if I don't talk honestly about this again with science-oriented groups, they just think I'm very, very narrow in my understanding of the problem. Okay, so, have you ever heard of Archbishop Usher? Archbishop James Usher believed that God started creating the world on Sunday, October 29, 4004 BC at 9 o'clock in the morning. Now, that's true. That's what he thought. He was very precise in his thinking. We're going to talk about that a little bit. Now, you remember what humanism is, and humanism has co-opted fields of study in our universities. In other words, there's no text of divine origin, allegedly divine origin, no big God out there. So that's humanism. So they reject the idea of going to the Bible to determine anything, including the age of the earth. That's what we're dealing with. So remember this guy, he proposed uniformitarianism, which is not catastrophes, but everything is the same speed as today. And that's very important because that uniformitarian concept is heavy in all things that you use to date. Okay? Everything you use to date something is based on uniformitarianism. That's the foundation for it. No prospect of an end. The present is the key to the past. Now, in Britain, does anybody know what this is in Britain, Great Britain? What? It's Hadrian's Wall, exactly, sir. This is Hadrian's Wall dating to the Roman period. So this, at the time it was looked at, was thought to be maybe 1,800 years old, and that was almost halfway back to the flood. And so people thought, okay, you can see the erosion there, but boy, when you look at mountains, surely this is more than double that. Surely it's been much older than that. And of course, they weren't allowing for any last actions of the flood. So they look at old things like that and couldn't imagine it being a mere few thousand years old. So people like this guy, and this is Charles Lyell, who wrote the book that Darwin had as he took it to the Galapagos, Principles of Geology. Imagine the world might even be 1 to 2 million years old. That was sensational thinking back in the day. Then he got a guy come along named William Thomson, he called Baron Kelvin. Remember Kelvin units? Studied heat loss expert, estimated the age of the Earth to be 20 to 40 million years old. Couldn't be older than that because it'd be too cold. And it's warmer than that. Well, this guy came along, and he's an expert of nuclear physics, and he said, no, when rocks decay, they produce some heat, so yes, the world could be even older than 40 million years. What is the currently accepted age of the Earth? Currently accepted age of the Earth. Anybody have a shot at that? 4 billion is pretty close. 4.55 billion years is the currently, give or take a billion. What's a million among friends? So anyway, currently accepted age of the Earth. Oh, incidentally, how old is the universe? Currently accepted age. Yeah, almost 14. 13730. And incidentally, they already have seen stars, and I should say galaxies, that they think might be even 13 billion light years away, looking at the oldest possible things you can see. Coming out with a new space telescope very soon. Did you hear about this? Within a couple of years, there might be a new space telescope that can see even further than the Hubble. That's very cool. So, what is the Bible for evolutionists? Remember this? It was a geologic column. You remember that chart? And this is supposedly some of the major events. Right there, life appears in the fossil record. Then you've got various plants and animals. This is what they think. Dinosaurs and mammals appear in the fossil record. You've got flowers, people up here. But then you've got extinctions, various extinctions coming along, including the dinosaur extinction right there. So they think this is separated by millions of years, okay? Now, years ago when you would go to, is it Dumbarton? What is a place up in Alberta, Canada, where the Dinosaur Museum is? Glengarry, is that it? It's near Calgary. Anyway, they have the Dinosaur Museum that's basically the Dinosaur National Monument for Canada. And it's there, and it's a world-class, wonderful museum. I was told by the local Adventist that there was an Adventist that worked in there too. But anyway, as you walked into the lobby, you could see this sign in the lobby wall, "Speak to the earth, and it will teach you. Who among all these does not know that the hand of the Lord has done this?" Job. And I'm thinking, well, a little tip of the hat to creationists. That's very nice. And you walk inside, and of course, millions of years. But anyway, very interesting. Beautiful, beautiful museum. But very evolution-oriented, because the second time I went back, that was down. It was no longer there. I thought, maybe pressure, who knows. Anyway, let's speak to the earth. Let us speak to the earth. Now, how did Usher come up with such a precise date for the age of the world? The facts are these. The book of Genesis is actually very interested in chronology. In fact, some of the begets and everything show that they were more interested in total years than other books of the Bible. For instance, not only do you have the first birth, the age of the dad when the first baby was born, but it even goes on to say, and he lived this much longer, and then for a total of this many years, and it was really interested in chronology. So, now I want to teach you I'm not a Hebrew scholar at all, but I know a few words, and I'm going to teach you the first word in the Bible. Here it is. That's Bereshit. And Bereshit is Hebrew that reads from right to left. Did you know they read right to left? That's weird, right? Okay. And Arabic is that way, and I was told by a woman in the last church I was at that Japanese is that way too, right to left. Anyway, Bereshit, and it's got these letters. Now, normally vowel points are not in there. They don't have the vowels in the first original writing of God's Word. And that's interesting for a couple of reasons. Here, I'll give you a little, this is a bonus right here, a bonus, oh boy. When they got to the four-letter word Yahweh for the name, a sacred name of God, who shall we say sent us? Tell them Yahweh, God told Moses in the burning bush. It means I am, I exist. It means I am, I was, and I will be. All of that in this wonderful word. Okay, it was such a sacred word that the Hebrews taught themselves to never speak it. Never speak it. And so, guess what? To this day, Hebrew scholars are not 100% sure how to pronounce it. So for years, when they came to the word Yahweh, I'm using that reading, Yahweh, whenever it came to that word, years later, when they started to add vowel points, the vowels in there, they put vowels from the word Adonai in there, which is Lord. Just to make sure you never say Yahweh, you say Lord. Okay, so when you're reading that, so if you're reading it out loud, well, here's the thing. Later on, Europeans saw this, and they're looking at this word and say, oh no, I know how to pronounce this. It's Yehoah, Jehovah, that's what that is. And there's no such word. It was a combination of two words. Now, Jehovah's Witnesses, to their credit, have recently, at least in the last few years, said, we don't think it was ever pronounced Jehovah. It was Yahweh or something like that. But it's interesting. In fact, the word was so sacred that when a Hebrew scholar was actually coming to the point where he was copying it into a new scroll, he would put his pen down, I think wash his hands, take up another pen, and use that for those 4 letters, and put that pen down, wash his hands, and take up the old pen, and keep going. That's sacred a name. Very interesting. Here's the first word in the Bible, and it's pronounced Bereshit. So you can say it with me, so you can say Hebrew. Here we go. Bereshit with a hard TH. Bereshit. Bereshit means literally in the beginning. Now, the earth was without form and void. And somebody, I forget if it was Roger or somebody, Roger, you suggested this, and I get this in many churches. So Stan, when God starts creating, the earth was without form and void. Does that mean it was already there? Was there a rock that God had created before the 6-day creation? Was it sort of floating and waiting for God to come back to and make into a living planet? And the answer, the basic question is, does that help us? You know, maybe he did it 4.55 billion years ago. And the answer comes back as a resounding no. It doesn't help us at all. Because we're not talking about bedrock. We're not talking about the age of the bedrock. We're talking about the age of, well, let's see, do I have a picture? The age of fossil layers. Because right in between these fossil layers, occasionally there's a flow of lava. And when that lava flows in there and hardens, and it becomes datable according to standard views. So those lava flows could date to millions of years. That's where the issue is. Because we believe all these fossils are part of the flood. Does that make sense? So it's involved with the dating of the flood and the fossils, and that's where the issue is. Not the bedrock down below, which could have been 4.55 billion years ago, but it doesn't. So the Hebrew allows you to do that, but to me it doesn't help. So it's like, I don't care if you believe that or not. Doesn't matter. Doesn't help us with the age of the earth issue, which is where rubber meets the road for me. Anyway, so back to the earth is without form and void, and it's the 2 greatest words in Hebrew, I think. Without form and void, those 2 words. And they are tohu and bohu. And the earth was tohu and bohu. I don't know, it just sounds cool to me. Okay, whenever you have "u" on the end of a word, that means no. So no form, no fill, all right? So the earth had no form and no fill. And then, for the first 3 days, God forms. And the second day, he fills those forms, takes care of the tohu and bohu. Is that interesting? So, and then on the Sabbath day, he finishes it off. Now, and the question that always comes up is, how about day? How long was a day? Then God said, let there be light, and there was light, and God saw that the light was good, and God divided the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And evening and morning, day 1. Here's another Hebrew thing, and that's the word one there. There's several options in Hebrew for the number 1, but the one that the writer here chose was echad. Now, echad is often used in Hebrew to describe a combination of something that now has become one. And the father, and the man shall leave his father, the 2 shall become one flesh, echad flesh. And hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is echad. So there's a combination, multiples make one. So here you have a combo, evening and morning together, those 2 make day 1, or echad, an echad day, a combination of 2 making 1. Now what's interesting, you know the difference between ordinal and cardinal numbers? Cardinal number is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Ordinal number is 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th. Okay? In Hebrew, they've got that too, that difference. Echad is an ordinal number, all right, 1, but when you have a 2, oh, I jumped ahead. Let's finish this. Yom. Yom is day, like Yom Kippur. Okay, day. Can day ever mean more than 24 hours? As I told you before, my son thinks I lived back in the day. So Okay, the day can mean a period of time. Can it ever mean that in Hebrew? And the answer is, why, yes. Genesis 2:4. In the day that the Lord created the heavens and the earth. So it can mean a period. But when Yom is combined with numbers, 283 times in the Old Testament, 283 times, it means 24 hours. Also, when it's combined with evening and morning, it means 39 out of 39 times becomes that. Actually, a Hebrew scholar has said there's no way that the author could make it more clear in his writing that we're talking about the same as 24 hours we now experience. And he says he knows of no other professor of Hebrew at any leading university would say otherwise. So the writer was writing as specifically as he knew how. In fact, also in Hebrew, there's a difference of writing in historical stories, a narrative, versus prose. If you look in your Bibles and you look at Psalms, you will see that it's lined differently in your Bible. It's not just a paragraph, it's a line, right? Like poetry. But the structure of the Hebrew clues the translators, oh, this is poetry, this is songs. In the same way, they could do that with Genesis, but they don't do that in Genesis. It's a story form, narrative form. So quite literally, the writer could not possibly make it more clear that he's talking literal. Now, let there be lights in the firmament. Okay, so the day 2 thing, well, I guess I could have finished it there. Cardinal and ordinal numbers. Ordinal number, literally it says evening and morning day 2 on the second one, but no, it doesn't say that. Evening and morning, a second day. And a second echad, basically, a second combo day. So the second day was like the first day, a combination of 2. Okay, let there be lights in the firmament of the heavens to divide the day from the night. Let there be for signs of season, days and years. God made 2 great lights, the great one to rule the day and the lesser one to rule the night. What's the problem with this? What? Okay, no, what's the problem with sun and moon day 4? Where did the light come from for days 1, 2, and 3, right? I mean, and I used to really bother me, and I used to think, well, does he make it appear, but it was already there? What was there, like fog? What was, kind of, I'm thinking of all these ways of dancing around this. And then, I had light. Boom, here it is. I think God could do whatever he wants. Pretty deep, huh? Doesn't need to have the sun there. And you know what's kind of funny about this? There's a theological reason for making the sun on the 4th day. You know what that theological reason is? To make the sun seem less important. It's true that it's the most popular thing in nature to be worshipped, always has been the sun. I mean, if you think about it, all pagan religions start off with you hire somebody to be a pagan priest, and you say, sir, we want you to find out what makes the sun happy. You do whatever it takes. You keep the sun happy and off our backs, and whatever, you don't have to worry about working. We'll pay you a salary. You just make sure you keep the sun happy. And there's pagan worship right there, basically. That's how it got going, I think. They wanted to make sure the sun would come up and the crops would be good and all of that kind of stuff. But the most popular object has been. And even in evolutionary circles, the idea of this pond, this Campbell's mushroom soup kind of thing that we all came from, this bubbling crude here, I kind of think it's amazing how it's more or less attributed to, thank you, Mr. Sun, because we wouldn't be here without you. Oh my goodness, the sun is almost the creator, if you know what I mean in the language you hear used sometimes. Anyway, so it's like God is saying, you know what, I don't need the sun, I'll just make him along with everything else. Don't need him for light, don't need him for time, don't need him for anything. But he's useful, I'll make him as a servant of mine. It's almost like God is making a theological statement. Because as you know, in the future, there is no night there, they need no lamp nor light of the sun, for the Lord God gives them light. So, right? So apparently not that necessary. Okay, talking about age, back to age. How old was everything that first Friday? How old was Adam? You know what? I have a theory on when God created Adam. I think it was at 9 o'clock in the morning. And I think that, no, seriously, I think it was 9 o'clock, 3 hour, third hour. Why? Because Jesus went on the cross at that. And then when Jesus died at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, it was finished. And I think God, when he created Eve, it was finished. So I think he might have had, I don't know, I just think there's sort of a, can't prove it. But anyway, incidentally, ladies, the only time God created anything and said it was not good was when God created man. Right? Adam. Adam, ugh, this is good. You gotta do better than this. Am I right? Eve, now everything's good. And I have to tell you this too. This is from Dr. Joanne Davidson from the seminary. Okay, Dr. Joanne Davidson, the Hebrew teacher. She said this, in Hebrew you don't catch it. It doesn't come out in English very well. But the very first thing that Adam said when he saw Eve was, now that's a joke. But actually in Hebrew, in English it's called, now, this is the bone of my bone. Okay, this. In Hebrew it's, wow. She says the first thing that Adam said was wow when he saw Eve. It's a Hebrew scholar. How can she be wrong? How old was everything that first day? How long was the tooth of that horse? Was there fruit on the trees? Yeah. So God created everything with the parent age. I've had people say, so Stan, are you saying that maybe God created the mineral world with a parent age to make it, I don't know, more useful, more balanced, more elements, whatever? And I say, that's a good thought, but no, I don't think so. But that's a clever thought. I don't think so. We'll talk about that as we get to it. So, why did God take so long to create the earth? Good answer. Very good. And that's really the basic answer. But why doesn't he just simply say, let there be everything? Poof, and there it was. Because we all know what a year is, what a month is, a day, but we don't have any astronomical thing for the week. It's clear that God is creating the week. All right, then God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it. Remember, blessing makes it a better thing than others. You with me? Remember that? Hebrew. Okay, it's a better day. Sanctified it. Okay, tell me, I'm a homeless person who walked in here and doesn't have a clue about religious sounding words. Tell me what sanctify means. Life well lived. How does it work on a day? Well, how does God sanctify something? What did he do to it? Set it aside is right. Very good. Set it aside. Made it special. I could have 7 pens right here, all expensive big pens, and all blue, all the same, identical. And I could take one out and I say, with this one only, I will write love letters to my wife. Can't write them with the 6, only with this. And that's sanctified in the Hebrew understanding what that is. That's set apart for a special purpose. You follow? Okay, so God set the day aside for special purpose. And guess what? They're not part of the 10 suggestions. So let's talk about this. Can you read music? What's that? Okay, Beethoven, huh? Da 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 da, da 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 da, right? Okay, so what are these marks right here? Those are rest spots. So when you get to that part, da 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 da, this is what you do. Da 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 da. Is that what you do? Some of you might. So the word Shabbat, excuse me. Where'd my water go? Water. Pastor. There it is. Time out. Too much talking. And that, Cindy would say amen. I'm going to show you, this is the best illustration of the word Shabbat. I know. It means to stop and hold until you continue on, right? So, life is meant to be in 7/7 time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, stop. 1, 2, 3. That's Sabbath. So it's not a suggestion, it's a commandment. God says, I know you people. You will just keep going and keep going and keep going. So on the 7th day, stop. And do something different. Then pick it up. Well, that's it. That's Shabbat. Rest, cease, stop. Incidentally, it coincides, the Sabbath day coincides with Saturn's day, according to a Roman historian back in the day. Vespasian attacked the Jews on the day of Saturn, on which it was forbidden for them to do anything serious, defeated them. So the planetary week, right? The continuous 7-day cycle that runs throughout history, paying no attention whatsoever to the moon and its phases, is a distinctly Jewish invention, according to this scholar. In other words, what he's saying is, there is no explanation in the world today, no other source of a 7-day week than the creation story. That's where the world gets it. So, anyway, now, hasn't the calendar changed? This is a month that you wanted to be on salary, okay? Because this is when we went, most of Western Europe went from one calendar to another. What calendars were they? From the Julian calendar to the Gregorian calendar, which is better for leap years and all that kind of stuff. Here it is. This is the month. 1, 2, 3, 14, 15, 16. We had to catch up. So anyway, you can see now there's a month you want to be on salary. Just working 3 weeks and get paid a month. So you see, though, that there was no loss in the week, the days. Wednesday was before Thursday and so forth. Kind of interesting. Now, getting back to this. 3 basic types of rocks, again, real quickly. Sedimentary rocks, igneous rocks, they ignited, they were hot, and finally metamorphic rock. And you remember this. But you cannot date sedimentary rock because it's made up of tiny little pieces of a previous rock. So how do you know how old that rock is? You don't. And even though they made some attempts at it, the only one you can date is igneous rock, according to the standard view. So it's got to be generally basalt. This is where it is. That's where the game is. So how old can you tell a rock to be? It'd be nice if they came with stamps, age stamps. I wish they did. Yeah, don't happen. Incidentally, where's that? Plymouth Rock. Okay, in Massachusetts. Yeah, I don't think it's probably an even older rock than that. But anyway, assumptions of radiometric dating. I hope that I don't put you to sleep, but this is where it is. Okay. Assumptions are, first of all, the decay rates are constant. The initial ratios are known. You know how much of the stuff you have at the beginning compared to other stuff. And finally, they've been in a closed system. There hasn't anything that snuck in or anything that snuck out. Okay, all those things have to be in place. All those things are challengeable. But anyway, do you remember half-life from school? You remember half-lives? Half-life, okay. This is the decay of a certain element from the parent, we'll call the mother, or the parent, into the daughter. So the mother is becoming the daughter by falling apart. Isn't that a nice vivid image? Okay, so things are, the mother, how long it takes for the mother stuff that you start with to become now half of mother and half of daughter, that period of time is considered to be a half-life. So there it is decayed, fallen apart, lost some particles, become daughter material, and now at the point where it's half of daughter and half of mother, it is a half-life. Okay, then it's continuing to decay, lose another half, lose another half, lose another half, but this is supposedly consistent throughout that period of that period of that, half-life. Okay. Now, okay, this next slide took me a day to do, so please, some ahs or oohs, or I'll even take applause. Here we go. This is carbon-14 dating. And carbon-14 dating is not, repeat, not used for millions of years. It's used for thousands of years. Let me illustrate. So you got up in the atmosphere and you got all of these carbon, you got nitrogen up there. Nitrogen is most of the air that we have. And you got this neutron hitting a nitrogen atom and powie, knocking a couple pieces off, leaving you with carbon-14, heavy carbon. Carbon is usually carbon-12. So carbon-14, a little heavier, and carbon-14 is now in the air and it goes into the trees. Okay? Thank you for the applause. I feel I appreciate that. Carbon-14, yes, thank you, thank you. Carbon-14, and carbon-14 gets eaten by cute little critters. And cute little critters nibbling on the carbon-14 full of leaves gets it into their little bodies. And then, oh, sadly, the day comes when there's no more eating done, no more carbon-14 getting into the critter, i.e. it's no longer alive. And the rest of the carbon, so inside that critter, the carbon-14 falls apart and becomes nitrogen again. And what's left of carbon will be carbon-12. Only carbon is left in there. So how much carbon-14 to carbon-12 and all that is the idea. Are there any questions? Okay. So carbon-14 is used to date critters or things that used to be alive, trees, plants, animals with organic material. It can only date organic material. And it's got a short half-life of 5,700 years. So 5,700 years is all it takes for half of it to go away. So it's useful for half-lives that are in the thousands of years. You will never see a carbon-14 date older than, say, 50,000 years or something. But here is what it's got to be working. It looks good on paper, but here's the problem, the initial ratios. Carbon-14 is made up there. Only place we get it, only place. Carbon-14 is made as sort of a factory kind of thing up there with the striking, but if you've ever messed up the atmosphere in any way and changed the carbon ratios up there, it throws the whole clock off until the atmosphere restabilizes and you get the same amount coming in as they're going out and all that falling apart. So it's got a continual cycle. You got to have this saturated and stable up here. Example. Krakatoa. Remember Krakatoa, the story of the volcano in Indonesia, wherever it was, Malaysia, 1880s? Huge eruption. Ionized the atmosphere. Messed up the carbon dating. And to this day, they will not date carbon-14 around that general area because they know the clock was thrown off. Same thing with the atomic bomb blast at Bikini Atoll in the South Pacific after World War II. It ionized the atmosphere, threw off the carbon-14 dating in the area. They know this, they stay away. So the point is, if you have a major event that affects the atmosphere and the carbon ratios, throw it out because the clock is wrong. Remember, the assumptions of the initial ratios have to be known. You know, got to know what you're starting with. And that's throwing it off. So I frankly think that carbon-14 dating is probably pretty good for a couple of thousand years. But if you get closer to the flood, I think the clock is going to be thrown off. That make sense? Now that's carbon-14 dating. That's not millions of years. I am now concluded my carbon-14 talk. We are going to millions of years now. Whoops. No, I haven't. This is pretty good. This is a carbon-14 lab talking about the problems with carbon-14. These are people that know. One back before that. There it is. The troubles with the radiocarbon dating method are undeniably deep and serious. Despite 35 years of refinement and all this, assumptions have been strongly challenged. Continuing the method depends on a fix-it-as-we-go approach. It should be no surprise then that fully half of the dates are rejected. The wonder is surely that the remaining half come to be accepted. There are gross discrepancies, the chronology is uneven and relative, and the accepted dates are actually selected dates. This guy sounds like he's got a burr on his saddle? Man, he's unhappy. So anyway, and yet these are people that are professional in the area. So kind of interesting. Selected dates, in other words, if you get 3 dates for a sample, what they're saying is, okay, which one works best for your model? Okay. Do you understand? So they can get widely variations in the dating. And they're complaining about it, these people. Anyway, kind of interesting. Okay, carbon-14. So always with a grain of salt. Always. Especially the older dates. Now, the best part of the talk. Because I get to talk about Hawaii. Gentlemen, I got to do something that every red-blooded American male wants to do once in their life. Play in lava. Am I right? How cool is that? I got to play it, well, I didn't get to play in lava, but I got to go up close in lava. There I am. Okay, let me give you the story of this. And ladies, it was 25th anniversary, so I took my wife to Hawaii. Points? Points? That works. Okay, good. And she knew I wanted to go look at the volcanoes up close. Anyway, so the day came, we drove over to where you park next to the old flow that came across the highway, can't drive any further. Parked there, there's a ranger kiosk there. There was a woman ranger inside. I went and said to her, can I walk up to where the lava is coming out? What did I expect? Duh, no. Instead, guess what she said? Sure, just be careful. She pointed out where I should go. So, walked over and over and over these old flows, up and down, over them, and picked up a very long stick while I was going, which turned out to be a very smart thing. And I finally got up to the place where this stuff was oozing out of the ground, and it was amazing. Have you heard lava is hot? It really is hot. 2,000 degrees. So if you turn up your oven at home, the highest you're going to get is about 500 or 550. So about 3 or 4 times as hot as your oven can get. And I mean, I totally get now the Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego story. Totally get it. The closest I could get to it was, the lava was about from here to this rail, okay? Now, we're talking hot. I got the stick, and I want to put some in this little metal cup I bought the day before. I wanted to collect some lava. I originally thought, hey, I'll just go. So I'm like, I had this on a rock, and I'm sticking this in the lava, and it catches on fire, and it drops, catches on fire and drops, catches on fire. Ooh, there's a little bit still on there. And I pull it over and I put it in that metal thing and I poke it down in there. And I drop the stick, and I got my little water bottle, and I and there is an illegally collected bit of lava from a national park right there. I don't think they're going to miss it. Could be wrong. But anyway, what I want to do someday is take a piece of this lava and send it into a laboratory and get the dating of it. Because with lava, the date starts the moment it becomes hard. I was there the day this was born. I can vouch for it. And I want to send it and see what kind of date. Problem is, these labs are getting pretty sharp on this stuff. Where'd you get this? How old do you think it is? Because it'd be a big embarrassment for them if they get a date that's way off, and I publish that. So, and anyway, but how cool is that, right, guys? Got to do it. Got to do it once. You can do it. Just be careful. And there was a place. Here's another picture I took of some of the red lava coming out. There's a place. There was a little crack in it, in the lava, the old flow, where there was this river flowing right down toward the ocean. It was just amazing. Just the power of our God, the creative power, the forces in this world, just amazing. Anyway, very interesting. So the thing is, potassium is a metal or a metalloid. Potassium 40 breaks down into argon 40. Now, argon is a gas, right? So argon, if it's in the rock at all, if it's liquid, it's going to bubble out. It's out. But when it becomes solid, the argon now gets trapped inside. And that's the idea that the amount of potassium to the argon is the way they date it. Now, it's got a very long half-life, 1.25 billion years. So it's one of the things they use for millions of years of dating, right? So let's get to it a little bit. Potassium argon is here with a half-life of 1.25, but that's used over 80% of the time. So all these others with uranium, lead, and that's usually for granites and things. Potassium argon is used most of the time in age dating, and again, almost always in lava. Again, the issue for us creationists is we've got lava flows that date to millions of years that are running between the fossil records, so that adds, frankly, that's a support to evolution, isn't it? They think those are millions of years ago that these fossils were here. Oh, and there's a date of lava just next to it that dates to millions of years. So bingo, they feel it's, what are you even talking about to challenge that? So, we're going to get into some of these things. Now, issues for dating the Earth, real quickly. Radiometric dating anomalies when some things don't work. For instance, this is a basaltic rock, Uinkaret Plateau in the Grand Canyon. There's a lava flow coming down this canyon, and they decided to date it with several methods. Potassium argon, and they got this huge variety of dates, anywhere from 10,000 years old to 17 million years. MY is million years. They tried rubidium strontium isomer, and lead isomer, and they get up to 2.6 billion years old. 10,000 years or 2,600 million years. What is it? And then just for the fun of it, they dated this lava flow that's clearly older, and they got dates that were mostly younger than these. So you see, it looks good on paper. When you apply it is where the issues pop up. Okay? Mount St. Helens lava has been dated. What's wrong with this date? 1986. Is this correct? Okay, 80 was the eruption, but 86 there was a little bump of lava that regrew in the center of the top of it. So this is actually correct. 1986 is when you got a little bit of lava come back, and they dated that lava. And guess what? You've got millions of years on the date of this 1986 lava, up to almost 3 million years old. So you see it looks good on paper. When you apply it, that's where there's a problem. Okay, here's another one of those cases. This sandstone is supposedly 225 million years old, and yet it wrapped around a piece of wood here, and that wood was carbon dated to 33,000 years old. We have a lot of those. We have a Jurassic layer deposit in England, and it wrapped around a 20 to 28,000 year old carbonized tree stump. Carbon-14 has been found in diamonds. And diamonds are supposed to be among the oldest stones in the world, 1 billion years and more old. And they got carbon-14 in them. That's not possible, and yet it is there. So it makes it seem like the diamond is not so old. Issues for dating the Earth. Here's a few living fossils. This is a great story. In 1938, have you ever heard of the coelacanth? That funny-looking fish? Okay, the coelacanth was on display in the British Museum, and they wanted to point out these 4 legs at the bottom, or I should say fins. They look like they're going to be legs. Look at them again. Let's do it again. Bingo, bingo, right there. Those look like, give it a few million years. Those will be legs, and that'll be Grandpa coming out on the ground. It eventually becomes our ancestor. Yes, coelacanth. Okay, meanwhile, 1938, they caught one in South Africa, off the coast. A real life coelacanth, no doubt about it. This woman in the picture there was a local museum director. She heard about it, rushed down there. It was too late to save the insides because they'd already cleaned the fish. But anyway, the outside was there and a little beat up, but they took a picture, and it's a coelacanth. So she and others started telling the fishermen, listen, if you ever find these fish, we'll buy them from you. We're interested. So they started finding them. And they've been finding hundreds since. And the coelacanth has even been videoed down on the bottom of the ocean there, off the coast of South Africa. And you know what they do with those 4 fins? They swim with them. That's something? In other words, they're not hopping on the ground or doing anything that looks like they're going to be legs at some future time or whatever. Anyway, coelacanth, very interesting. Have you ever seen a horseshoe crab? They look like space crabs or something, very funny looking things. And they appear in the fossil record supposedly 400 million years ago with absolutely no difference in structure. How about this ant, Martialis eureka? And if you think about it, this is a funky, kind of a funky looking ant. They thought this existed only in fossils and represented the oldest form of ant, the ancestor of all ants. And then they found some living ones. Oops. So incidentally, the name means ant from Mars. I think that's pretty cool, Martian ant. Anyway, okay, ginkgo tree leaves. You know about ginkgo trees? I've got one up here with a leaf as well. They can be up to 270 million years old in the fossil record. The leaves are absolutely identical. Creationists have been approached by, well, evolutionists have told us on the side quietly, frankly, if you guys stuck to plant evolution, you'd pretty well have us. There's very little evidence of plant evolution. Okay, so here's a good story about the handsome young ranger in Australia, near Sydney, Australia. They have a national park called Wallaby National Park. And this handsome young ranger said to his superiors, I'm going to go explore one of the canyons out here that you can't get to unless you drop by rope. I'm going to go check it out, bring your report as to what I find. So he went and did that. And when he got down in the bottom of this canyon, looked around, he saw a tree he'd never seen before. Took some samples, pine cones, pictures, and all that kind of thing. It was very clearly related to a South Pacific pine tree. But up to this point, it had been only known in fossil records. And up to 200 million years old fossils. They're absolutely identical in every way. So a living fossil, and that's called the Wollemi pine. And you know, I used to have one of these. In nature, it's the rarest grove in the world. There's only a grove of about 70 to 100 plants. But very prolific in terms of pine cones. So the pine cones they were selling to people to grow them and raise money to support the original grove, right? A fundraiser. So I actually had one. It was about like, well, no, it grew up to about like this. And I used it in my lectures in Idaho, in Moscow, University of Idaho. And the day came when I decided it was getting a little big. I'm going to donate it to the University of Idaho, their rare plants collection. Very happy to get it. Then told me, Stan, anytime you want to come and take it out for our lecture, just come get it and just bring it back later, no problem. So I did that once. Second time, it wasn't there. So, and they had a turnover in people, the supervisors, so they didn't know what happened to it. I got to get another one. Anybody here know anyone in Australia? I think they sell them in Australia, but not to export. I got to find one. Anyway, okay, you saw the bird footprint thing, how that throws off time. Let's keep going. Miracles of preservation. We find leaves sometimes, still foldable. You heard about this? Remember the T-Rex bone? Notice this, proteins have been found in a Triceratops, Triceratops. The guy in Cal State Los Angeles discovered this in a Triceratops bone, and he talked about it, and he got fired. So you got to be careful where you talk about stuff like that. So, but anyway, take a look at all these different things where they have found proteins, and it, you know, and that list keeps getting bigger. Oh, some are very well preserved. Some of the dinosaurs that we find. Look at this guy again. You saw another picture of him earlier. Nodosaur, very well preserved. Uniformitarianism. Let's use this as we date other things. Okay. How about erosion of continents? If we use the same rate of erosion of continents, North America should have been gone several times in the last millions of years. If we go with uniformitarianism. Let's go, how come there's not enough sediment in oceans, not enough salt? Carbon-14 in wrong places, lack of salt. Too much helium in rocks. Okay, here's a good one. Helium in rocks. If you go to our museum, there'll be a display there with a couple of rocks and it says, the case of the missing helium, ask about it. Well, what's the missing helium? Here's the thing. Granite. Granite decomposes. Some of it inside there actually becomes, well, one of the daughter products is helium. If you know about helium, we only get helium from the atmosphere. We can't make helium. Don't know how to do it. We have to get it from the air. So, helium balloons, right? Can they put helium inside rubber? No, it gets right through rubber, and that's why helium has to be in a mylar type balloon. And if it's in a mylar type balloon, it's a little harder to get those little atoms through mylar, but sure enough, give it a few days, and even mylar will droop down. Because helium gets out. So helium is a product, it's a tiny atom. Why isn't it all out of the rocks that it decayed from? It should be a product in the atmosphere. There should be much more helium in the air than we have now. This is a long known problem. Some people have said maybe it floated off into space. No. They looked at the rocks really carefully, and you know what they found out? The product, the helium product, is still in the rocks. And you know what that looks like? That looks like that decay happened in the rocks, but quickly. I talked to a creation physicist once about this, a world expert. He worked for nuclear whatever for the United States, like in Los Alamos. He knew his stuff. And he was speaking at a conference as a lecturer, and he talked about some of this. And I asked him a question afterwards. We were all gathered around him in the break between the next speakers, you know, and I'm like pushing through all these people wanting a piece of him. And I wanted to get my question in, so I finally got in there. I said, make it a good question. I said, so doctor, do you have a theory as to what happened physically to the world at the introduction of sin? And he just brightened up and said, well, yes, I do. Like that, was waiting for that. He says, I think that the effect of it was like a shock wave that hit nature. A shock wave. Boom. I thought, well, wow, what would that be like? What would that do to the mineral world? Okay, I'm going to go quickly to something at the end of this, because I want to, this. What is decay? What is decay? And you know what? Evolution has no explanation for death. No explanation whatsoever. Because if the purpose of life is to produce genetic information that goes down the line, make babies, then the most effective way of doing this is to not die. And you would just constantly be making more babies. There is no explanation for death. So, here's a really wonderful and happy thought I can give to you as you go home and contemplate the great things that have been said here today. Here it is. You know what aging is? And what I mean by aging, I mean post-mature aging. Aging is incremental dying. Isn't that an encouraging thought? Pastor, aren't you glad you invited me here for that warm gospel-type thought? Because you and I have every conceivable repair system designed by God in us. We just don't seem to be keeping up. Am I right? When I'm talking to kids about this, their eyes get big, right? And I've got a different way of saying it, don't worry. But anyway, I say, you know what? You see these hairs right here? To the kids. They used to all be brown. But underneath the skin, that little part that makes the color has died. Big eyes. It will never work again. It will never make them brown again. And that's really it, isn't it? That's what's going on with all of us. It's decay. It's decay. The creation was subjected to futility. So creation was never made to decay. Are you with me on this? Decay is an intruder. But it was subjected to futility, not willingly. We didn't have a vote in this. But because of him who subjected it in hope, i.e., this is temporary. There's a better ending than what we're in right now. Because the creation itself also will be delivered from the bondage of corruption, for we know that the whole creation groans and labors with birth pangs together until now. I talked to another seminary professor who's very interested in, he's a theologian, very interested in the subject of corruption and decay. And I talked to him, have you ever considered that Romans 8 might also be talking about the mineral kingdom as well? He said, well, no, I guess I've always thought it was like animals and so forth and people. So it says the whole creation. Wouldn't that include it? Maybe even the rocks are showing decay, corruption, and so forth. I'm going to conclude with an illustration that I think is dramatic and yet explains a lot. And that is, I'm going to start with the question, what is the wrath of God? What is the wrath of God? And there's a place in the Bible that describes the wrath of God. And it's Romans 1. It says the wrath of God is revealed now among men. And what is that wrath? It says God let people go the direction they wanted to go. And it says the wrath is, and now they are suffering the consequences of their choices. And that's the wrath of God. I'm going to physically illustrate the wrath of God for you. And to me, I've often gotten shivers when I've done this. This is God. This is his creation. Here's the wrath of God. I just got it again. God steps back and honors requests that he leave, but he steps back some. Jesus felt that on the cross. The wrath of God, he felt it. Bang! Where'd you go? You were just here. Where'd you go? That's the wrath of God. And the wrath of God is seen and felt in this world that was created perfectly. But the original managers of this world said, God, we don't want you here. We're happy on our own. This other guy, Lucifer, we'll listen to him, but not you anymore. And God honored that by stepping back. And when he did that, what did that do to nature? What did that do to Adam and Eve? What did that do to all of us? Subjected to corruption and decay. The good news is God is going to do this. Back to his creation and restore. God is an organizer. God is a source of power and putting things together. Nothing died in the presence of Jesus. It couldn't. Jesus can restore. God, when he comes in, restores. I can't wait for that day, folks. I can't wait for that day. Meanwhile, things are falling apart, and we're trying to measure them, but guess what? I think what we're trying to understand is the departure of God and measuring it scientifically. You follow? We may not have exactly the same results that those who look at it in a different way do, but I think we are seeing the data saying things are falling apart. It's not God's original intent, but it's been subjected in hope. I hope this has been an interesting time for you. I've been enjoying my visit with you. Thank you so much for inviting me. I have a set of lectures that the pastor has on DVDs, and if you're interested, you can talk to him about that later after sundown. But anyway, thank you so much for inviting me. May I pray with you right now? Let's bow our heads. Heavenly Father, you are not only the creator, but you responded to the request to stand back, And even now, Jesus stands at the door and knocks and wants us to invite him in, because he will come in if we allow him. And with him, he will come in and bring order and love and organization and beauty and joy into our lives that only the presence of God can do. I pray, Lord, for all these people here. These people will experience that if they haven't already. Bless the ministry in Chehalis. May the word go out that the everlasting gospel is to go forth, and the call to worship him who made is part of the last message this world will hear and needs it so very deeply. Thank you, Lord, for blessing this time. May we have information now we can share with others. May our faith be strengthened for this time together. And may we, above all, be ready for the day Jesus comes back. That's my prayer. In his name, amen. Thank you, folks, so much. If you have more questions, you can come up front here. But otherwise, I kept you a little long. So thank you. God bless you.